people always say, oh, we'll just fix it in post. No, no, you don't fix it in post. You fix it on the set before it gets into post. I mean, how many of us have gone to see movies, especially like independent films or student films, or even worked on those kind, and everything's really pretty stellar. The acting's good, the story's good, the shots are nicely composed, you know, the color looks nice, and then the sound is atrocious because it was an afterthought to people. And sound can't be an afterthought. It has to be a before thought. It has to be when you're preparing the movie. My mom, Kay Rose, who was the first woman sound editor to win an Oscar, and this is her Oscar right here. I brought it for you to. Yes. Yep, she was the first woman sound editor to win an Oscar for the movie The River, which is here. Mark Rydell directed film, Mel Gibson, Sissy Spacek, 1985. She was the kind of person who story was everything to her. And you use sound to support the story. You know, nobody goes to the movie to see sound effects or hear sound effects. In England, years ago, they used to hire the sound editor to come on and read the script and kind of go through the script and make a list of all the kind of noisy things to be aware of. You know, of course, a script is just words on a page. You get into an environment. To give you an example of that is the movie Ordinary People that my mom and I did, which was one of the hardest sound jobs I've ever done. You're like, ordinary people? It's like wind and birds and dialogue. What's the big deal, you know? But what happened was they were, especially if you guys seen it lately or ever, it's a great movie. And they shot the very sensitive psychiatrist scene with Timothy Hutton in an aluminum warehouse near an airport. Oh, wow. And what happens to aluminum when it gets heated by the sun on one side? You know, it pops and cracks. And so they were saving money, though. They saved a lot of money on. So the sound mixer turned everything down about 12 dB. And so, of course, we had to raise it all 12 dB, which brought up this noise floor that was like, and in a dialogue-driven movie, you have nothing to hide behind. There's no car crashes and explosions and planets blowing up and lasers and guns and stuff. There's just air. The key to really good soundtrack is that you have a bass track of good production sound, so well recorded, good signal to noise ratio, a voice to the noise floor, and you could always add sounds. You can't take them away. I mean, yes, you can take them away now in iZotope and various tools, but do you really want to spend all your creative time fixing problems, which of course is part of the job, but I personally would rather be creative in how can I use sound to tell the story. Like if a guy is sneaking down the hallway to get away from the bad guy, do we have to hear his footsteps sneaking down the hallway like that? No, because it's not part of the story. We don't have to hear every single sound in a movie. But our audiences, especially in LA, have gotten so sophisticated about sound that if you look at any movie from the 80s, except Star Wars, that's the exception, pretty much any movie from the 80s, we had just production sound. We didn't do 100% Foley like we do today. The great production mixer, Jim Webb used to say, production sound has a production value. And people forget about that. So it's like if the sound guy says, look, we can't roll right now, and everybody just says, oh, it's okay, we'll fix it later. Yes, we can fix it later. But, you've got actors in a performance that are sensitive to what they're doing right then and there. And as you know, when you sit down to edit and you hear those performances over and over and over again, and then you come in to fix it with your ADR, and all of a sudden, you're hearing this strange noise from the actors. It's not what you're used to hearing. There's things that I could tell you about what to use if you're making your own film as an independent filmmaker. Make sure that you hear what's being laid down on the tracks. I had an experience with a friend of mine who had an independent feature she made for very little money and no money, and somehow she talks everybody into doing it for free, including me. And it was like, but you don't understand. Editing a feature film sound-wise is like weeks and weeks and weeks of work. And she goes, well, everybody worked on the movie for free when we were shooting. It's like, and how many days did you shoot? Oh, 6, or 10 or whatever. It's like, I'll be working on this for months, And I said when I started listening to the tracks, I went, what happened? Oh, I got a great recommendation from a sound guy. I said, well, did you listen to what he was recording? No, because he came so highly recommended. It's like, you know? So make sure you get a pair of headphones and listen to what's being recorded by your sound mixer, because you don't want to get in the editing room after you've wrapped the production and found out that your takes were no good. Because really, there's nothing as good as production sound. You all know that, right? I mean, yes, you can reinvent things and do wonderful things with ADR and Foley and sound effects, but there's just something very real about real sound that's recorded well. There's lots of ways that you can minimize the problems on a set when you're shooting. And I've made 3 short films and a whole bunch of commercials and things like that. And even me, with all my experience in sound, I still had a hard time waiting for an airplane to go by, or like, come on, we gotta go, you know. You know, a DP, a cinematographer, will say, well, we've lost the sun, we can't shoot this now, you know, which would be the equivalent of a sound guy saying, we can't record this take, there's a jet, you know, you're right near the airport, and there's a jet going by every 3 minutes. But, you know, people go, oh, well, we can fix it later. No, you know, if you're shooting a shot that doesn't show people's feet, put little booties on their shoes. We don't need to hear their shoes going around, because you could always add sound later. My mom used to say when she did television, you're only as good as your last reel, you know, so, and it's your name going up on the project. So when she did television, she did like the Big Valley and the Rifleman. You can still see her name on the credits at the end of some of the episodes. And, you know, and they all access the same sound library, like, you know, G22 was a gunshot, you know, and H25 was horse footsteps. But it's how you cut them. And one of the mixers said to her, well, I see you're using the chin sock that everybody's using for everything, and why is your sound, it's the same number. You know, he can see on the, well, we used to have cue sheets, and you could see the number of the cue on there. And he says, why is yours different? She said, it's where I placed it. Because, you know, when you sock somebody, I mean, it's all the camera angle. I mean, you could be 3 feet away and somebody could do this and look like they're, you know, socking somebody's chin. So it's like where you placed it is how effective it can be. And sometimes it's a frame. Can any of you think of a time when sound really affected you, either sound or the lack of sound? I think Woody mentioned silence, because silence is a very powerful sound. You know, I liken it to going up a roller coaster, and you know when you get to the apex at the top, there's that moment that you're just hovering in the air, and it's like everybody kind of takes this collective breath, and then boom, down you go. And that's what, in Star Wars, they use that a lot, where, I think in Episode 2, where something slices a planet or something, and and then there's like this black hole, and Ben Burtt calls it a black audio hole, but it does that same thing. It like makes the audience kind of take a collective breath, and then, bam, we're into it. So the minute you have no sound, it makes the next sound even more powerful. So those are kind of little tricks you can use in editing. Do you know how important sound is to anything? If you can't hear something, you know what happens? Yeah, if you can't hear something, exactly. If you can't hear something, your experience is lessened. And, you know, we've all had the experience of being in a movie theater and somebody says something and you didn't understand it, and then you turn to your friend you're with and say, what did he say? That happened a lot on that Batman movie with Bane. Anyway, I won't go there. But you know, if you can't hear something, it takes you out of the movie, and when you're out of the movie for even a few seconds, you've lost, you know, the momentum of being in that movie experience.